let's learn how to configure and customize PICO-8 to be exactly how we want it. PICO-8 has two ways of accessing configuration settings. Most settings are only available if you bought and installed PICO-8, but some settings can be changed while running PICO-8 by using the command line, which means it can be done in the Education Edition too. So we'll go over those first. Let's get started. Let's first load up a demo cart that we can use to test the changes in our settings. If you haven't tried it yet, Jelpy is the biggest demo with almost a full platformer game on it. Since we just opened PICO-8, we start with the home folder open, and if you remember, the folders and files from our installed demos look like this. Let me teach you a few more commands and tricks to navigating PICO-8 files. We could use the cd command to change directories, but we can also load any file from any directory if we know how to write the full location of the file. Let's type load space, then a slash, which means the home folder, then demos, which is the inner folder, then another slash, which means inside of this demos folder, then the name of the file. By the way, you can use the tab key on the keyboard to let PICO-8 auto-complete folders and file names. So I can start typing gel in Jelpy and press tab, and PICO-8 fills in the rest for me. Press enter, and it will be able to find and load the correct file, even though we are still in the home directory. By typing in the full location of the file, it is like we are drawing a path to the file so PICO-8 doesn't get lost along the way trying to load it. Alright, let's check out this demo. Such a cool game. Okay, back to the command line. It's important to know which directory is currently open because if I want to save to a new file now, it will save in the currently opened home folder, even though I loaded the file through the demos folder. I'll just show that quickly, but you don't have to follow along with me here. We can also make new folders to better organize our files. There's another command, mkdir, and that stands for make directory. So let's make a new directory, a new folder, where we can save our game files while we are playing around, making edits, and just testing things out. While you're following this course, let's use this folder for all of the game files we'll make together. So let's name it Nerdy. mkdir space nerdy and enter. Now that created a new folder in our home folder named Nerdy, but it doesn't automatically open this new folder, so we are still in the home folder. Use the ls command to confirm, and now it shows we have two directories in our home directory. Perfect. The save command can also be told a more specific location too. Save space slash nerdy slash Jelpy test. Enter. That worked too, and we still haven't changed directories. By saving this demo as a new file, we've created a safe testing file where we can edit freely and not worry about overwriting the original demo file. Now let's use cd and ls commands to check that it's saved in the correct folder. Looking good. To go back to the home folder, we can either step back one folder with cd space ... or cd space slash to jump from any folder back to the home folder. Okay, here's another cool thing you should know. Remember how the run command has a shortcut Control-R? And that works no matter where you are in PICO-8. That is true for the save command too. The save command's shortcut is Control-S. And no matter what editor we are in, or what directory is currently open, PICO-8 is smart enough to overwrite the file in the location that it was loaded from, or where it was last saved to. So I press Ctrl S, and this red bar pops up to confirm it is saved. I can also just use the save command by itself, and it confirms by showing it is saved into the nerdy folder, not the currently open home folder. For Education Edition, the shortcut Ctrl S will only save in the temporary disk on your browser, so you still need to use the actual save command whenever you want to download your file. Awesome! Now you know all the commands to navigate and customize your PICO-8 folders however you'd like. Of course, if you own PICO-8, then you can easily organize your folders using your computer's File Explorer too. But let's be honest, doing it with commands like a retro computer is a pretty awesome nerdy skill to have. Now there's no way to delete or rename files from the command line, so those things you'll have to do in the File Explorer. For Education Edition users, I suggest you download your game file every time you take a break, and organize your own folders and files somewhere on your computer. Alright, you are masters of your PICO-8 files now, and we can jump into the config settings. Type in the command config. This displays all the configuration settings that are available to us from this command line. In pink, it shows us the command config, and then setting. But setting is inside these square brackets. That means we don't write the word setting, but we use a special keyword instead. And then it lists the available settings. And these are the keywords that we can use after the config command. Volume is pretty obvious what that setting will do, but it's not so obvious how to change it. Luckily, PICO-8 will give us more information if we type config, volume, and press enter. In pink again, it shows the more specific command that we need to use, config, volume, and val, which is short for value. In programming, a value doesn't have to be a number, but for volume, we can assume it is expecting a number here. But what are the acceptable numbers? In blue, it tells us what the value can be, and it shows a range from 8, meaning quiet, to 256, meaning loud. Then it tells us what the current volume is set to, and the default is at the maximum of 256, but the default in the Education Edition is 192. You likely don't need to change this, but let's try it out anyway, because we can always reset it back. Let's first run Jelpy to experience the default volume again. Ctrl R to run. Okay, escape. And now let's try the volume config setting. Unfortunately, we don't see all the text about config anymore. But here's a cool tip when using the command line. If we press the up and down arrow keys on the keyboard, then we can go back to see the last commands we entered. Not only see them, but PICO-8 rewrites them in the command line for us, and we can just press enter to run the command again. This will save us a lot of typing. Okay, I'll press the down arrow back to an empty command line, then the up arrow once, and this time we'll enter a value. Space, and let's try 10. Ctrl R, and yeah, it's much more quiet. You can try different volume settings to find what's best for you. Just be careful if you're wearing headphones not to make it too loud. I think 192 is a good setting. Now that you know how to use the config command properly, the rest of the settings are very similar, so let's go through them. The second one is theme. Config theme. And here you can see it also wants a value, but the value is a word. It shows 3 available themes: Auto, Blue, and Classic. Auto is the default, which is blue for newer versions of PICO-8. If you go back and watch PICO-8 tutorials before 2019, you'll see the code editor wasn't always blue. And if you want to see what that looked like, then we can change this config theme to Classic. PICO-8 looked like this when I started, but I actually prefer the higher contrast of the blue now. Alright, the next setting is GIF or GIF length. You might not even know it yet, but you can easily save and share GIF animations of the PICO-8 screen. This is a great way to share progress of your game or share bugs with people helping you. Config GIF_LEN, enter. So the value it wants is in number of seconds, and the current default is 16. It doesn't tell us the range here, but it is between 1 and 120 seconds. 0 will turn off the GIF functionality. PICO-8 is actually always recording whatever is displayed on the screen, and not just when a game is running. So that means you can even record what you do in the PICO-8 editors too. 16 seconds is a good length, but I prefer to set mine longer to 32 seconds or over a minute, because I will capture a GIF at the exact length that I need, which is sometimes long, sometimes short. So having a longer GIF length setting just allows me to record longer when I want. Since we're on the topic, pressing Ctrl and the number 9 will save a GIF to your desktop by default. In the Education Edition, it doesn't save automatically, but a preview of the GIF will appear in the corner of your screen, and you just have to right-click on the image, then click Save Image As to save it where you want. Now that's going to stop the recording at the moment you press the number 9, and it will save whatever was on the screen going back for however long you set your GIF length setting to. So by default, if you only use Ctrl 9, then you'll always save 16-second GIFs. But if you want more control, then you can set the starting point of the recording with Ctrl 8 first. This way, you can press Ctrl 8, then start showing what you want, and then press Ctrl 9 to capture a GIF of exactly that amount of time. But it won't save longer than your GIF length setting. So for me, since I always use Ctrl 8 to start the recording, it's better to treat this setting like a maximum length, which will allow me to capture short or long GIFs whenever I need. The second GIF setting has to do with the starting and stopping of the recording. Config GIF_reset_mode, enter. It's pretty straightforward. We need to give the command a mode, which is either 0 or 1, and the default is 0, which says don't reset after recording. It's talking about the starting time of the recording. If we set this to mode 1, then every time we stop recording to save a GIF, that will automatically become the new start time for the next GIF. The next setting is also about how GIFs are saved. It's called GIF scale, and this will determine the size of the recording. It says we give it a size, which is a number, and the current setting is 2. If we set this to 1, then our GIFs will save at the exact same size of the PICO-8 screen, which is 128 by 128 pixels. The default of 2 is double that, so 256 by 256 pixels, and so on. GIF scale of 3 will be 384 by 384, 4 will be 512 by 512, which should be plenty big enough, but you can go up to a maximum of 8 times the original screen. Honestly, 2 or 3 is perfectly fine. Another scale we can control is the size of the screenshots. Just like recording GIFs, you can capture a screenshot of whatever is on the PICO-8 screen at any time by pressing Ctrl and the number 6. It works the same way as GIF scale. So 1 is 128, 2 is 256, and the default is 3 for a 384 by 384 PNG image. The maximum setting is also 8. The next setting is called Splore Filter, but it only applies to fully installed PICO-8 users, so we might get an update where this doesn't appear anymore in the Education Edition. We'll talk about what Splore is in a later video, so let's just ignore this for now. The last two settings I'm really happy about, and these are going to be very helpful to you as you learn to read and write code. Let's look at Jelpy's code again, but this time I'm going to blur it out as I scroll through it. By blurring it this way, you can better see what we call blocks of code. When you see a programmer quickly browsing through code trying to find something they want to change, they aren't reading every word and every line. They are actually able to blur out most of the code like this in their mind, so they can focus on what's important. Well-formatted code is organized neatly into blocks like this, just to make it easier to read and find things. Think of it like a dictionary. A good dictionary is written in a way that helps you find the word you are looking for quickly and easily. It does this with formatting. The main words are usually bigger and bolder and far to the left, while the details about those words are smaller and indented to the right. You can ignore blocks of details while you focus on finding the word you want. Once you find the word, the next important thing are the meanings. So now you can focus in on the meanings and still ignore the extra information that is indented further until you find the meaning you want to focus on. Finally, you can read the full block of relevant information you want with the correct meaning and see the example sentences. Code blocks work the same way, but we don't use bold or change the font size. So we separate blocks of code mainly with indentation. This function in Jelpy is one block of code, and I ignore everything inside of the block until I need it. Just like looking for a word in the dictionary, I'm focused only on this leftmost indentation, and see that these are both functions. So then I look at the function names. Well-written functions like this help me understand immediately what the blocks of code are doing. If you write your code like this, it's really hard to browse through and find what you want. Just imagine being given a dictionary written like this. You'll feel instantly frustrated. And the same thing happens to programmers when we read code written without indentation too. So, indenting your code blocks is really important. And now that you understand that, you can appreciate these last two config settings. The first one is tab width. Let's see what the default is with config space tab underscore width and enter. Okay, it is currently only 1, which means when we press tab on the keyboard to indent code, it displays the indentation as just one space. But for beginners, I recommend setting this tab width to 2 or even 3. As you can see, this increased the distance that blocks of code are separated from each other, making them easier to tell apart and therefore easier to read. It also helps you make mistakes less and find mistakes easier, but we'll get into that later. Now, it's important to note that some programmers use the spacebar to indent code instead of the tab key, but I highly recommend you get in the habit of using the tab key right away. The main reason is because this tab width setting will not affect spaces. So if I highlight this indent here, I see 2 yellow rectangles. Each one is a tab. We've set one tab to show as 3 spaces wide. But watch what happens when I replace this with spaces. Well, that doesn't look any different, does it? Because both spaces and tabs are basically invisible until I highlight them. And now I'm going to change the setting back to just 2. You can see the blocks of code stayed nicely lined up, all except for this one line, because they are spaces, not tabs. Play around with the setting yourself to find the right amount for you. Personally, I like this setting with a width of 2, and I suggest anything more than 1, and that's because of this final setting we are going to turn on. Config, draw, _ tabs. It says we can set it to on or off, and when on, the tab characters are drawn in the code editor, and the default setting is off. So what are these tab characters that will be drawn? Well, let's turn it on and see. Config, draw tabs, on, and press enter. This is super helpful. Now these purple vertical lines show up wherever we used the tab key. And notice that it didn't work for this one line here where we used spaces. So let me fix that. And that's much better. Let me also space out the blocks of code in this function just by pressing enter. Notice that the tab key is automatically written on this new line to help us stay organized and well formatted. These lines help us to visually connect the start of the block of code with where it ends. It also helps us see what code is inside of other blocks of code. I will keep these turned on, and I definitely suggest you do too. Unfortunately for Education Edition users, your config settings are not saved after closing your browser. So you should save a note somewhere with the settings you like and quickly use this config command each time you boot up PICO-8 in your browser. Alright, those are the configuration settings that we can change right inside of PICO-8. I'm glad you get to know about these commands and settings early on. This course is free, thanks to these amazing supporters on Ko-fi. If you want to join their ranks and help thousands of students worldwide gain access to a course like this that they might not be able to afford, then click on the support button on our website to become a member and even get some behind the scenes and early access benefits. Subscribe to the channel and visit our website, nerdyteachers.com.